Today I'm here to do a spoiler-free review of Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. This is her newest release. It's super buzzy online, and you're either in two groups. You're either those that pre-ordered it and are probably reading or already finished it by now, or those of you that are wondering what all the hype is about. So I'm here to talk about whether or not you should read this book, my thoughts on it without getting to spoilers, and if that all sounds good, let's get started. First, let's start with a really brief synopsis in a spoiler-free manner. And so this story follows two graduates who decide to travel to hell because their renowned professor at Cambridge, who is responsible for their studies, has died in an accident, and so they want to go save his soul, not out of kindness, but because of the fact that they need him in order to finish up their own school. And so we follow them as they travel there. They travel together reluctantly. They're very much rivals in school, both competing for the same positions and recognition, and so we follow them as they're reluctantly going through there. This is a story that I would describe as both a conversation or characterization of life in Cambridge with a fancy twist, but it also has an edge that feels like it almost dabbles into satire, specifically breaking down the problems with academic life, specifically focused around those that are pursuing PhDs and higher levels of education. And so compared to her previous books, this one most resembles her previous book, Babel, just because both of them have that academic setting. That one is more focused on a dissection of dark academia, really playing with the themes expected in that, but using it as a conversation to discuss prejudice and other conversations around the segregation that often exists within these prestigious universities. This one, while it definitely still touches upon the same themes, is more focused on the weight of graduate programs, how these students are just put through the ringer and very much sacrifice so much of their lives and themselves in order to get their degrees. And if anything, this is meant to be one more manifestation of how far graduates need to go, the fact that they need to go to hell and back in order to get and finish their schooling. And so again, when I say satire, it's really the fact that it's doing some, not necessarily laugh out loud humor, but more so very quiet, picking at the problems that come with this academic life. Now, I'm someone who did go to university. I have a bachelor's degree, but I didn't pursue a master or PhD. So I can definitely tell that this book is targeted at a particular group that I'm not part of, but I have a good awareness of that group. And I think that even if you don't share that same experience, there definitely is a lot that is relatable if you did pursue more school, and you definitely can nod along with certain parts, even though it's clear at the same time that this book is definitely written as a very niche piece, really meant to be a conversation that feels very personal and very targeted to the people that she is writing for in this case. So I'd say if you did not enjoy Babel, I would say that this one is probably also not for you because, again, it's the closest comparison. If you did enjoy Babel, there's a fairly good chance you'll enjoy this one as well, although they definitely still have their differences, which I'll get into more. Compared to other works like Yellowface and the Poppy War trilogy, which I both love both of those, even though they're quite controversial and very mixed reviews. Those ones are quite different. It's great to see her range as an author, but this one definitely feels like a kindred spirit with Babel, if you're looking for a comparison there. Now, in terms of my feelings about this book, I'll say that the overall were quite positive. As I sit down to record this review, I haven't rated it on Goodreads, but I expect to give it 4 stars. I think it's a solid book and one that I could see myself reading again, although I will say that of her backlist books, in which I have read all of them at this point, it is probably my least favorite, maybe a touch above The Dragon Republic, which certainly has its pacing issues, but this one is, in my mind, the least interesting of all her books based off my personal preferences, my interests, but still a really good book and a great contender for a favorite of the year, just because I think that her character work and storytelling is so engrossing to me that I really love what she does, even when the subject matter doesn't entirely circle around things that are normally up my alley. And so with this one, as I mentioned before, it does a lot right when it comes to that dissection of academic life. You have a lot of conversations how these characters are sacrificing everything. Their health, they're not eating, they're putting everything first. They are very much slaves to the institution and how it affects them. And also diving into the competitive piece. As I mentioned, the two graduates that go are not friends, but rather rivals, and they're fighting for the same positions, awards, and so forth. And part of the conversation within the story is that they come from different backgrounds. The main character that we follow has less privilege in how she got to Cambridge as opposed to her fellow student who came from a background of being part of the right family who knew the right people. And so part of the conversation even goes into the fact that when they are later looking for jobs and positions and so forth, it's a fact that he, unlike her, can go ahead and name drop. He knows their families, he knows all the ins and outs. And so talking about the fact that academic life really falls into that nepotism challenge, and you really do see that as, again, everyone kind of knows each other, whether they're officially family or not. It's the fact that it's very much a small circle, and whether or not academics like to admit this, it is a fact, especially when you get to those higher niche levels, that it matters who knows who, and certain people get doors open for them that certain people do not. And so if that rings true to you, if that is something that is a speaking point, I think that you'll get a lot out of this book. And so that brings us to the world building of the story, which arguably for me was the least interesting part, or at least not up my alley. I think other readers will latch onto it and enjoy it a lot more. And that's the fact, again, that they're trudging through this fantastical version of hell. So the author has taken the time to imagine how the world works, the certain rules and regulations, for lack of a better word, that are all designed to explain how this plane of existence exists. And so you have the characters slowly revealing this, talking about this as they're going through. Even though this book is about going through hell, I do want to preface that it's not set up to be a horror book. While there is some movement in terms of action later into the book, for the most part, this book really goes slowly. It is a walking story of characters moving along, but if you're looking for an action-packed survival story through hell, that is not what this author is trying to do, and instead it very much takes its time. I just found the setting to be a little bit flat for my taste. Again, I love the academic conversations, a lot of the theory dumping that goes around the book that may not be for everyone's taste, and I just love when the author dives into a topic that clearly she feels very passionate about. However, the actual setting piece to me was just a little bit lackluster, and for me, a little bit more in the background of the story. It very much felt like the backdrop rather than necessarily adding a lot to the story itself. I'm sure people are going to disagree in the comments, and again, as long as you can be respectful about it, love to hear your counter arguments. I'm just talking about my experience here, so just be aware of that. And that ties in with the criticisms of the book. We're talking about who I do not think this book is for. And so I will let you know that from my reading experience, this book is very slow. As I mentioned, there isn't a lot of action, and overall, just the plotting, the movement of the story is quite slow, and it's also a very large book, over 500 pages. And so if you're someone who likes a book with a narrative pace, something that moves along and has more action, or more just quite frankly happening, this book may not be for you. As I mentioned, there is a lot of times that could be described as what people will call info dumps, where the author will go on for paragraphs about a certain part of academic life or something happening to the characters or that has happened to them, and the story just takes its time and is not in a rush. And so if you're someone who doesn't want to read paragraph after paragraph without any story progression, this story may not be for you. It might be quite frustrating. I would compare a lot of the pacing and character work and a lot of, again, the narrative style, again, going back to Babel, that if you enjoyed that book, it's going to be very similar. If you found Babel slow, if you found it boring, I can pretty much bet that you're going to have very similar feelings about this one. I think that this book is doing a lot right, but it's very much, again, a book that is not in a way meant to be a bestseller. It is a bestseller. This book was highly anticipated, huge burst of popularity as it has come out, which is great to see for an author that I like, but I also feel like it's a very niche book, or at least the author did not go out of her way to make this book more accessible or interesting. She didn't worry about making this book for everyone, which is both a positive about the book, because I do like when an author really dives into a book and doesn't worry about making it too commercially friendly. But because this book is, again, so popular, so many people have pre-ordered it, so many people are going to read it because of the buzz online, I do think that this book is going to start to get some mixed reviews, because you're going to get people who pick it up that are not necessarily the type of readers who would enjoy this, that just want to know what all the buzz is about, which is why I want to make this video in the first place. So to summarize, I would recommend this book primarily to readers that have an interest in academic life, whether they have gone there themselves or just find it a really interesting topic to discuss in minute detail. This book is primarily going to appeal to those of you that love slow-paced character stories with very good writing. Again, those of you that don't necessarily care about the speed of a story, like to take your time with it, and don't mind a larger book. If you've read this author before and have liked their previous work, like Babel, this book is a really safe bet. I would quite easily put this in your hand and say, I think you're gonna like this one too. If you've never read this author before, this could be a place to start, but again, it has to have those other ties in there, again, of loving those slow-paced character stories with that academic focus. So you know yourself better than I, and so very much you can decide if this is a good jumping off point. Again, I really love this author's range. I think that she does some interesting things and doesn't necessarily focus on one area, but I do see in some of her more recent projects, she seems to be bringing in different aspects of her own personal experience and very much writing the stories that clearly have meaning to her, and again will largely depend how much you as a reader connect with them depending on your history, your experience, your past. And I wouldn't say that this book necessarily goes out of its way to reach out to the audience that won't necessarily have that shared experience. Again, for those that maybe didn't pursue higher education, this book might feel kind of snobbish, kind of othering, and really will not necessarily have that piece of connection that you might be looking for to make it a fun, digestible read. So that is just my opinion. Love to know if you have picked it up already. What do you think? Are you enjoying it? Did it meet your expectations? Just try to be mindful of spoilers in the comments. Give some warnings if you are going to talk about anything towards the end of the book. Otherwise, if you haven't picked it up yet, I'd love to know if I've convinced you to pick it up or perhaps convinced you that this book maybe isn't for you. Either way, love to hear from you in the comments. If you're new to my channel, hopefully you stick around and subscribe. Hit the little notification button so you don't miss a video from me. Otherwise, I hope to see you again soon. I'm hoping to do more review videos as the year continues. So if you're enjoying this, definitely give me a thumbs up and I'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye-bye.